for more on the foreign policy in this potentially historic agreement, we turn now to a prominent Republican backing the president's Iran deal. Former Senator Richard Lugar worked with President Obama on nuclear nonproliferation. He also used to chair the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. His signature Nunn-Lugar Act helped dismantle WMDs in former Soviet states. A perfect expert to have on the topic. Senator Lugar now leads the Lugar Center and joins us from Washington. An honor to have you.
Thank you very much.
Why do you think, even with the skepticism that exists towards the regime in Iran, you have concluded this is a good deal? Why?
This is the best opportunity we have to delay and potentially to stop an Iranian nuclear situation. This is a deal that calls for Iran to get rid of 98% of its highly enriched uranium, to get rid of two-thirds of all of its centrifuges, to get rid of all of its 5 to 20% enriched uranium, and to do all of this by March, before any sanctions are lifted. Now, for the moment, every country in the world has voted at the UN in favor of this treaty. It has the backing, of course, of Russia and China, Germany, Great Britain, and France, who are parties with us. And they are sticking with us on the sanctions so long as we are with the deal. Now, if we were to back out of the deal, there is no assurance whatsoever their sanctions would continue, nor is there any possibility, in my judgment, that the Iranians would proceed to get rid of all of their material.
Right. I mean, that's the argument that when you put aside the rhetoric and the bluster, not completing this deal would actually, in a way, be soft on Iran. And you explored some of that in your comments about Chuck Schumer's opposition. I want to read from that. We were just discussing how the Democratic leader there is breaking with the president. You say, if Washington walks away from this hard-fought multilateral agreement, its dependability would likely be doubted for decades. Tehran would be the winner of this U.S. rejection because it would achieve its major objective, the lifting of most sanctions, without being required to accept constraints on its nuclear program. As you've explained, Senator, that is partly because of the multilateral dimension of those sanctions. When Senator Schumer and some of your former Republican colleagues say otherwise, are they sort of discounting the fact that this takes a lot of different countries to get done?
I'm afraid that they are, because they forget we would be there alone. The sanctions would not be reimposed by the rest of the world. So if Iran gets the freedom of its money, which everybody has been talking about, we are left really then with tough possibilities, namely military action or the suppression of military action on the part of those who might want to go after the Iranians. And this is a very brutal situation at this point that we better understand. And thus far, we've got the rest of the world with us. We've got a situation that by March, all this stuff, by and large, gets cleared out. And then it stays that way for the better part of 15 years. Now, at the 15-year point, why, perhaps we'll need a new treaty. Or maybe Iran will be a different kind of country. But in any event, that is a long stretch of reasonable safety.
Yeah, you mentioned the idea that one of the only other alternatives would be a military option. That's something the president has been more blunt about lately. Let's play some of that.
Congressional rejection of this deal leaves any U.S. administration that is absolutely committed to preventing Iran from getting a nuclear weapon with one option: another war in the Middle East. I say this not to be provocative. I am stating a fact. So let's not mince words. The choice we face is ultimately between diplomacy or some form of war. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not 3 months from now, but soon.
Do you think, A, that is basically correct, and B, from your long experience in the Senate, do you think that is an effective way for the president to try to bring along more support?
Well, I think it was effective on the part of the president, and I admire the president really for spending the time and effort that's going to be required, literally to lobby one by one, at this point Democratic senators principally, or members of the House, because this is crucial for our nation. It's not just simply one of many potential diplomatic victories for the president. On this one rides peace in the Middle East. It rides security for Israel. or for the Saudis, or for others for that matter, who are in harm's way. We are not a country that wants to re-enter a war with a country the size of Iran. But let's be very frank about it. The facts of life are that if Iran proceeds, and they've proceeded quite a ways now, and develops nuclear warheads to put on missiles, they are in a position really to create havoc not only in the Middle East, but likewise harm on the United States of America.
And so when you look across some of the Republican opposition, and obviously we're heading into an election year, do you think a lot of it is simply that there is intense partisan opposition to this president, and that a Republican president who struck the same deal, which, as you've argued, boxes Iran in, uses sanctions to get tough on Iran in a sense, would have more support from the GOP to do essentially the same thing?
I don't want to demean the opinions of any of my colleagues. They really must wrestle with their consciences on this sort of situation. I think this is, however, as many have observed, a time of extreme partisanship. But extreme partisanship in a dangerous world just doesn't work very well. And it really is going to be very important, I believe, for many Republicans to join with many Democrats in support of this treaty, because we're going to need to have those votes as things proceed. Things may not go altogether smoothly. And over the course of time, we are going to need to have in the Foreign Relations Committee a situation in which, as I worked with Joe Biden or John Kerry, we said a 9-7 vote is not good enough. We need 16-0, a face to the world of united support for our country.
And while we have you here, Senator, I also want to ask you about the ongoing conflict with ISIS, another issue I know you've given some thought to. Is the United States doing everything it can short of the ground operations that most Americans oppose at this point? Or in your estimation, is there more the U.S. should be doing diplomatically, militarily, or otherwise to somehow constrain what has become a sort of a lawless turf or an ISIS state area in the Middle East, which many people feel is untenable in the long term for us?
Well, I trust that the administration is, with the Joint Chiefs of Staff, composing a comprehensive plan. That has not appeared as yet, but it would have many facets because of the complexities that are involved, including training and including intelligence and including the use of our air power and our sea power and maybe other forces, the case may be. So I'll not try to second guess where that's headed, but for the moment, we do not have a satisfactory posture with regard to ISIS, even though there are some days in which we do well. But we also have a problem in Iraq, for example, of almost the division into three countries is often talked about, in which the Shiites and the Sunnis and the Kurds simply are not working together, and their country's future is at stake.
Former Senator Richard Lugar, former chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee, thanks for your time.
Thank you, sir.